Pixels20 here and welcome back to Bordertown. It has been a little while since the last Bordertown episode. We have taken just a little bit of a break while we've been working and focusing on some other series. And look, I don't want to really beat around the bush. I come with some sort of bad news if you are a Bordertown fan. I'm going to start wrapping up this series over the next month or so. There's a whole bunch of factors why I'm doing that, and basically the most overarching factor is that I have pretty much built everything that I wanted to build in Bordertown. Obviously, this is not a finished city, as you can tell by the cinematics that you are seeing right now. We still have so much more to build and so much more to expand in terms of the city, but in terms of everything that I wanted to build, I've already pretty much done it. And of course, there is still so much more to expand. Like, we've only just started scratching the surface of the city. We've only built a little bit of the Mexican side. We have all the outskirts of the city to do, but we've only just built the downtown of Las Palmas. So, we're not even close to some of the projects that I really wanted to work on. And, in order to get to places, for instance, getting to the foothill of the mountain within Juarez, I still need to build Juarez in the first place, and that's going to take a really long time, and I just don't see myself getting there. It's been, the amount of detail I've been going into this project, it really doesn't allow me to expand it to its full potential. The road layouts that I built in the first episode of Bordertown was actually a really problematic starting point, because I followed it so closely to El Paso and Juarez that, I was trying to make sure that I covered all basically try to cover everything that there was in El Paso. And that meant that I have a lot to expand in order to get to some certain areas. Whereas if I had just done the highways and tried to reduce the size of it to a more manageable scale, then I would have been able to achieve certain things much faster. So I think it's a mixture of detail and the road layout. There's also other reasons, so it's too flat. I feel like there's no variation in the landscape, which I actually really enjoy working with, is a landscape that is uneven and changes quite a lot, adds a lot of variation. Whereas this is just very plain, it's just a city, it just feels like a city, which actually looks very realistic and looks fantastic. But in terms of playing, I don't find it that exciting, working with such a flat surface. It's also just too big of a city. I'm not playing with any of the natural landscape, and I'm not playing with any forests, or I'm not even seeing how any of the game mechanics work, because the frame rate is so poor in this series because of the high detail and the amount of assets that I am subs to. I think we're looking at 1,300 assets and mods, which is just it's too crazy. Marble Mountain has 100, and I much prefer working, obviously, I think I'd actually probably prefer somewhere in between, but over 1,000 is just ridiculous, and it really slows down this game, and I see absolutely no gameplay elements in this. It's just purely for building and seeing how it looks within the cinematics. And going back to the road layout, I also think that by following so closely the road layout for El Paso and Juarez, it actually kind of stuffed up the creativity within this project. It meant that I didn't have quite as much creative freedom, because I was still following the structure of those two cities really carefully. Even though I was trying to go on my own tangent, I was still falling back into the pattern of just copying, what was in Google Earth. There's just so many reasons. There truly is. I just don't see how I'm ever going to be able to finish this project. And in saying that, I don't know if I really want to finish this project, because I have already built a lot of the things that I wanted to build. Still things I want to build that I'm just not going to get to, but I'd much rather start working on something different, or at least move on to certain other things and other projects. And I also think that that's going to make for much better videos too. So I'm really sorry if you love Bordertown. To be honest, I was only ever planning on doing this series for about a year, so I am falling short on that. But I think I'm probably making the right call for myself to stop this before it goes and drags on and just totally crushes me. And I think I'd much rather just finish on like a pretty positive note, because I am actually I'm still really enjoying the series and still really enjoying working on certain places. I just know I'm going to get to a point at some stage, if I have to go back and build more suburbs within Las Palmas, I think that'd probably be enough for me. But yeah, guys, I am so sorry about that if you are really enjoying this series. Do we still have a few more episodes to go? Like, there's probably about 4 or 5 more episodes that I still want to do, working around Las Palmas and Juarez. Both cities I really still want to work on. So yeah, who knows? We've still got a few episodes to go. But yeah, apologies if you're totally bummed out. And look, I really love the concept of working within 2 different countries, and I really love the idea of having a border and having the like polar opposite, I guess, cultures, mixing between each other. Like, that is still something I'm really quite excited about, and especially about Bordertown. I just really wish I executed it better, and there's just a whole bunch of things I'd change. Like, I reckon I'd probably have a fraction of the assets and mods so that I could actually share it with you guys a little bit better. I can barely share it with my patrons because it's a save game that requires so many local assets because I've made so many modifications. And I'd have less assets and less mods. I'd have the cities being so much smaller, something way more manageable, probably even smaller than Montana within my other series. Marble Mountain, or probably even smaller than that. And I'd also focus on the landscape too, and try to encompass, a much varied landscape, and something that was way more unique, something that wasn't just copied from Google Earth, something that was actually taking inspiration from many other locations within like America and Mexico. I don't know, who knows? Maybe one day I will come up with another series like this, or maybe Marble Mountain will take on some sort of, I don't know, maybe we'll take on parts of Bordertown that I didn't really quite get to. Feel free to hit me up if you're still really interested in seeing things like this in this game, because so am I. And I just kind of wish I just executed it a little bit better and a little bit more manageable. But I think that's just how this game works. Sometimes sometimes it works and sometimes it just doesn't. But hey, this episode is still really quite cool. I'm actually really excited about the work that I got done in this one, because I was working on Juarez, and I was working in a little bit more of the downtown part of this city, and I actually do quite a bunch of cool things just to like start shaping how this city starts to look. And I'm going to be working around here for the next few episodes at least, just shaping how I want this city to look, because I do want it to have a feeling of its own city. I don't want it to look like it's something that is an offshoot from Las Palmas. I do want it to hold for itself. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to structure the downtown area, and I don't get to that in this episode at least. This is more just like where the shops are, and it's still pretty close to the border too, so it's kind of just like on the fringes of the downtown. But I was just like testing out a couple of different assets that I have and trying to shift them around so that they follow a bit of a unique pattern to, the sort of structure of Mexico. I think the road layout really works quite nicely. I was trying to look at Google Earth and see how the road layout is in in Juarez. And it is just so different to the road layout in El Paso. It follows a much more, less rigid, less grid-like pattern, and I really like that about this area. It's like just polar opposites in terms of roads, and I think that's really cool. So I definitely wanted to encompass that and, make it look like it was a really different structure of roads than the other side of the border. But what you can actually see me doing right now is I am trying to detail this area to make it look like it has a lot more atmosphere than just by placing down buildings. So I'm placing down some billboards and some posters. These are all custom assets that were created by you wonderful people who jumped onto my Discord and made up some really cool custom billboards for Bordertown, which they looked so bloody cool. I'm going to be definitely popping down a lot of these over the next few episodes at least. But I'm also doing a bit of a mix of some of King Leno's boards that he created. These are posters that sit in shop windows, but I've just been using them on the sides of buildings because they're just posters, and I think that they look really cool, just plastered against the wall. I'm also using some park life assets just to create some different little marketplaces, because Mexico has just so many different markets that are just like pop up in the streets, and you can usually get some food there, or buy some fruit and vegetables. But yeah, and something else that I did was I changed a lot of the colors of these buildings. So Mexico has like some of the most colorful buildings probably in the world, I reckon, in terms of like contrast, and the variety of colors on these walls are just pretty amazing. So this is actually something that somebody suggested a while back, and I thought they should totally do that. And even just flying around Mexico in Street View, you can actually just see that. Even in Juarez, you can see like lots of colorful buildings. So made sure I placed down a few of them. And if you can't tell how I'm doing this, I'm using the painter mods just to change the colors. Some of the buildings don't really allow you to change the colors on the walls. They might change some of the props that sit on top of it, or change the roof or other little parts of it. So unfortunately, I couldn't do it with all the buildings, but luckily quite a lot of the buildings that Beard Monkey created for this series, the Mexican buildings that pretty much the only buildings that I'm using around here, a lot of those actually allow me to change the color and make them pretty much just the right color for this whole area. And to be honest, this area was quite a struggle to create. I think probably because I hadn't built in this theme for a while. This is like me coming back from working in Springwood and Marble Mountain. I wasn't really in the right mind frame of working in like a Mexican theme, so it's always hard changing between series and trying to get back into the swing of like what is a different style. And I think also the other really hard thing about working around here is that the road layout is really quite tricky to navigate. It does help having buildings as small as the ones that Beard Monkey created, but a lot of the bigger buildings don't fit within such a tight and such a small road layout. The grid's very quite small, and as you can tell, there's a lot of angles that means that you can't just have a standard grid-like pattern. And the buildings and houses in Juarez are so tight, and they are so like every little square inch of grid is basically taken up with some sort of house or building, and that's really tricky to achieve in City Skylines because pretty much everything is built on like a rectangle or square, and there's not really anything on an angle, so you have to either clip buildings together, or you have to build little parks or little bits of detail here and there. And I also think that's probably another reason why I've gone for so much detail with this series, is that I can't really just zone areas or just place down grids, because a lot of these areas mean that I have to create quite a lot of detail in order to achieve like a look that looks like Mexico, or has the same feel as El Paso, and that was really, really tricky. So yeah, I think maybe I'm just trying to justify how much detail I've gone to this series. No regrets, but yeah, it does. It makes for some really tiring work. So like a lot of the stuff that I do in this episode, man, it took ages. And not to mention my game kept on crashing. I think I had a bad asset. I think one of my assets was outdated, and every time I plopped it down, or if I looked at it using Find It, I think it just crashed my game. So a lot of the stuff that you see me doing is actually just deleted, and then I have to go back and rebuild it and just delete some of the footage that didn't really match up. So this episode was actually really tricky to make, and it took a really long time. So you actually probably noticed that in the cinematics, a lot of the stuff that you see will actually be quite different to the stuff that I build in the time-lapse, because I actually have to go back and rebuild it. There's nothing worse. And I've also got autosave turned off. I know like that's pretty much like a ridiculous idea, but I usually have quite a lot of problem with autosave. It usually freezes up my game so badly that it can either crash the game or it can lock it up just permanently and I have to restart it. So I just stopped using autosave, and look, I reckon like 99% of the time I'm safe using not autosave. I usually remember to save my game like quite regularly, but man, I tell you what, every now and again when the game crashes and I'll lose all that build, I usually just turn off the game and go and watch TV because I really don't want to rebuild stuff. It's a nightmare. So yeah, this episode was a real pain in the ass to complete, especially with it crashing all the time. So now I'm actually working on the main street. This street is probably the biggest road that I have in Juarez. So there's quite a lot of cars on there, and there's also, as you can probably tell, just a hell of a lot of people. And I've never experienced this, but there is just hordes and hordes of people. They're going from the suburb that I created ages ago in Juarez. And look, this is another reason why I would really like to, start a new series, is because this game is this series is just quite broken in terms of how people interact with the environment. So these guys are basically I think they're moving into the suburb. As you can see, we're getting quite a big influx of people moving in, but for some reason none of them are driving, so everyone's just walking along this street. And I've fast forwarded the game, I've tried to, I've gone and had dinner while the game's just been playing, and I've come back and they're still walking back and forth. I'm not really sure why they're doing it. I don't know why no one seems to be driving. Maybe I've banned cars somewhere along the line, but yeah, just a massive horde of people, and they're probably going to keep on hoarding until we finish the series. I just have no idea why it's like that, but yeah, it kind of looks really dumb. This last little bit that I'm working on, I really love how this area turns out. Actually, there's this like back street that I was taking quite a lot of inspiration from, and it reason why I like it is that it looks like it was probably once a street when the city was much smaller, but I guess as the city has expanded, this like little back street hasn't really been used for cars quite as much, and now a lot of the industry has taken up a bit of the areas, and parts of it's been turned into car parks, and some buildings are now being built over the top of this street. So I kind of wanted to create something that looked like that. So I've got the street that stretches in between the main grids of Juarez, and then I've just started to create some industry that has sort of taken up parts of the area. And yeah, I think it's quite a neat look, and I would like to do something similar in other series too. I think something like this in Springwood would also look really cool, especially for some of those abandoned rail lines that are all like in the southern parts of Los Angeles. I think that'll look really cool around there, doing something quite similar. But yeah, just detail it with some decals and just some general industry that just sits in that road. Some of these slum houses work really nicely because a lot of them are quite different sizes and different shapes, and some of them are just one square and one tile, so I can place them in quite easily, as you can see me placing down these shacks. The only problem, well, there's a couple of problems with these slum buildings. As much as I love them, the actual texture on them it's not very nice. Like, there's some textures on it that are actually really stretched and just don't look quite right, and they're also probably too run down for what I wanted to go for. I just didn't really have anything that really fits that style. There are actually some European buildings that fit that style like a little bit, but I don't know, there's just a couple of parts of those buildings that just don't look quite Mexican enough. And that's another really tricky part about this series, is that up until Beard Monkey created those assets for me, I just didn't have anything to do with any Mexican assets, and bigger buildings and other like actual commercial areas too. The assets, there's just not enough on the workshop. Some of them fit, some of them are clearly European, and some of them are probably a little bit too American for Mexico. But guys, that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I'm sorry for letting you down if I am finishing this series earlier than you want me to be doing it. I'm sure a bunch of you are probably a bit disappointed, so I am really sorry about that. But I think I am making the right call, and I am actually quite excited for, I don't know, just other things that I've got installed, and even some of the other work that I want to do in Bordertown to come, because I am still really enjoying this. I just think that, I don't know, it's just hard to work on a series when you know that it's not going to be completely finished. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.